So late last year, I decided to treat myself to a brand new watch. I'd seen it all over YouTube beforehand, and that is the San Martin Diver 6200, aka a homage to the Rolex 6538 Submariner. I wanted the old Bond feel without having to spend over £100,000 on a beat up relic of a Rolex. This matched the profile absolutely perfectly, and so I waited for the annual AliExpress 11/11 sale, ready to pull the trigger on my brand new Bond diver. I was able to pick the watch up for a final price of £130 and 17 pence, saving £40 and 51 pence off the standard price. I then used half the savings to purchase a couple straps to try on the watch when it arrived. 2 weeks later, the watch and the straps had both arrived, and I was keen to see what the condition was going to be like after spending 2 weeks coming from China. The straps packaging was as expected, low grade packaging, but did the job regardless, and the straps came untouched. However, the watch came with a complimentary golden brown NATO strap with accompanying spring bars. The watch arrived in this really unique San Martin watch box. I love the concept of this, and it did a really good job of protecting the watch going all the way from China to me in the UK. Before I get into the full review, I'm going to break down the watch's specifications beforehand. It has a case diameter of 38mm, the crystal at the front of the watch is a domed sapphire crystal with no anti-reflective undercoating. It has a very convenient band width of 20mm, so it's going to be very easy to change straps onto, as it's a very convenient size. It houses a reliable microbrand movement, the Seiko NH35. However, there is no date window, which means when you pull out the crown, there's going to be a date ghost position. So when you pull to the first click, there's only going to be turning and turning and turning, and nothing's going to change. That's because the date wheel is going to be turning, but there is no way of you seeing it because the dial has not got a gap for the date window. This does not affect any timings or anything like that. It still will perform absolutely fine. It's only just a minor inconvenience, and if you pull out the crown once more, you'll be able to stop the second hand and set the time. Hackable seconds means that you can get precise timing, which is always nice to have. This is an automatic watch, which means there is a weighted rotor in the back of the watch, so just wearing it or putting it in a watch winder will wind the watch. However, you can also manually wind it when unscrewing the crown, and you can then turn it just to wind it manually if you want to start it up from dead. I was relieved to see when I opened up the box, the watch was ticking and covered in a protective plastic. So after removing the plastic, you can see how good this watch looks. The bracelet is beautifully made with a side buckle and milled clasp. It also is a riveted bracelet, which I'll get onto a bit later on, but I'm just, to say the least, not the biggest fan of the riveted bracelet. So I then removed the standard bracelet, ready to put on the first Bond style NATO. And I purchased this on the 11/11 sale, and I think this looks absolutely fantastic with the watch. It really does give me those old school Bond vibes. Up next was the supplied NATO strap, which is a golden brown, and it looks really great in the sunlight against those gilded hands. However, doesn't sit as well as the Bond NATO does. Now, the silicone strap I ordered, when it arrived I thought it looked very similar to the Omega Seamaster strap, but when I got it out of the packaging I could see that it was just a fake Omega strap. I've never liked the idea of owning fakes and don't suggest anyone should purchase a fake. So what I did was removed the Seamaster retaining band on the strap and binned it. I then proceeded to cut away any Omega logos with my knife, and then lastly I used the Dremel to remove the logo from the clasp. With it on wrist, I can now say that I'm glad it does not look good with this watch at all, and I feel no remorse putting this into a box and never thinking twice about it again, ready to put on the Bond NATO. So out of all the straps, including the supplied bracelet, I think that by far the Bond NATO is the way to go, so I'm going to keep it on the Bond NATO for the rest of the review. There were a couple things I noticed straight away with this watch. The first thing being the sapphire crystal on this watch gives a very distorted view when looking at a slight angle. This is not very practical, however does give a real retro feel to it, which I don't really mind for this type of watch, but if it was my only watch I wouldn't really like it because it means it's very hard to view the time from certain angles. The other thing is the reflectiveness of the crystal on this watch. It reflects light like no other watch I've ever owned. It is very hard to read under direct sunlight or under the studio lighting, as you can see here. However, for its shortcomings in AR coating, it makes up for it in the QC. For the most part, everything is absolutely spot on. There isn't any dust on the dial or the hands. The bezel feels absolutely great with minimal wobble at all, and it lines up really well with the dial markers. The only thing I did notice was a slight defect in the second-hand loom application. It's not an obvious thing, but it is there nevertheless. So I've therefore tried it in many different conditions, wearing very different outfits, and I could say it's a really great classy beta watch. I'm not worried about it getting scratched or beat up, but I'm also able to take it out and feel like I've got a touch of forgotten elegance from a simpler time just ticking away on my wrist. There are a few things, however, I would improve on this watch. The first thing being the bracelet. I'm not a massive fan of the riveted bracelet as it's very tricky to disconnect links and reattach them, so I'd like to see that just with a classical pinning collar or screw links. That would be much preferred. I would also like the logo on the crown and the logo on the bracelet of the watch to both match each other, as I feel like this is just better for brand integrity. The next thing would be the lollipop hand on the second hand. I feel like it should be slightly smaller because right now it's larger than the actual hour markers are, and on the original Rolex it's actually smaller than the hour markers, so I'd prefer that to be a bit smaller. And as I've mentioned several times already in this review, I'd like some more AR coating on this watch to make it less reflective on the sapphire crystal. And lastly, I think the back of the watch should be engraved of some kind. I know that Rolex themselves don't engrave the back of the watch, but that doesn't mean you should follow them in that way. You can try and beat Rolex and do it better than them. You don't have to just meet their standards, you can exceed them. But in summary, I feel like you get the vintage look of the Rolex without the price tag and with modern day performance while having fantastic value for money, and I'd overall recommend this to anyone looking to expand their watch collection with a relatively small investment. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you've enjoyed. Goodbye.